In this video, I'm going to show you how to mount a 12 scale body shell. So I've got myself a 12 scale body shell, vernier ruler and a Sharpie. I've cut my body shell out to the lines. And now I'm going to find the center point of my front wheel arches. So to do that, I'm going to first of all check that both wheel arches are the same in diameter. So both of them are spot on. So now it's measuring 42.48, let's call it 42.5. I'm going to half that down to 21.25. So there we go, 21.25. And now at this point, this is going to give me the center of the wheel arch. Now for the guys that run the body shell further forwards, I'm one of those guys. I run it 3mm further forwards. I'm now going to add 3mm to that number, so it now becomes 24.25. Now I'm going to make sure when I put the caliper on the front edge of the arch, make sure that the caliper is running parallel with the bottom edge of my cut line. Mark it and then do the same on the other side. And that's the point that I'm going to line my axle up when I pop this shell on my chassis. It's going to give me my reference point. Now what I do, I take the ruler, I put it on the workbench. What I do is I then line up both of my lines with the ruler. And what that does, just double checks that I haven't cut, or marked should I say, the lines at different points, because otherwise I'm going to mount the body shell crooked. So those 2 points I'm pretty happy with are running parallel to the front edge of my body shell. So when I plonk it on, it's going to sit fairly neutral on the body. So that's that part of the mounting process. And I would say at this point that I think this is probably the most important part, because the front axles are going to give you that opportunity to line your body shell up nice and square to the chassis. So that's that bit done. On to the next. The next part, I need my chassis, a lipo, vernier, ruler, Sharpie and the shell. I've taken my car out of commission. It's the summertime here in the UK, hence why there's no electrics in it. Ideally, I would like the electrics in it so I could perfectly centralize the steering, but there's a little way around that, which I'll show you in a moment. So I'm going to centralize the steering. I get it up the front of my workbench here, line the axles up with the workbench, my bit of glass here, and I can double check it with my servo horn as well, servo saver, to make sure that's nice and straight. Then I'm going to take my ruler and push it up against the front edge of this chassis, which has got a straight edge, most chassis have, and then I can just measure from the axle to the ruler, that those gaps there are now perfectly the same. So I know that the steering is now centered on my car. Now I'm going to take my body shell and pop it down. But first, I need my lipo. And so my lipo gives me something to butt the body shell up against and to stop it from moving. So here's the point now that I use the lipo to push back until I line up my lines that I did with the axle. So now I'm just double checking that the line sits perfectly in the center of my axle on both sides, which they are now. Now the body's in a position where we can start to mark out the holes. At this point, I like to check that my front axles are equidistant from the outside of the Lexan. So I'm just going to adjust it a bit to the right and to the left. Again, this is a bit more of an eyeball. And again, the more you do it, the more comfortable and the more accurate you can be. Ideally, you wouldn't want your wheel nuts on because you won't be able to see the ends of the axles, but I've got my wheel nuts screwed all the way in and they're sitting flush with the end of the axle. So I know that now I've got my body shell centered on the car, and it's in the right position on the longitudinal axis so that the point that it's going to line up is where I'd like it. At that point, I'm now going to draw the spot in the center of the posts here. I'm going to stand up for this one. Takes a steady hand, don't want to be out on the razzle the night before if you got the shakes. So now I'm happy that everything's lined up, it's nice and straight. Take that away, don't need the chassis, and we have our holes marked out on the shell here. At that point, we're ready to. So I've reamed out the holes with my reamer. And it's really important, I think, when you're using the reamer, you go really gentle. It's so easy to get in there and start going like a lunatic at it. You're really just trying to ease the reamering there and be nice and gentle, not to take off too much. So those are the holes done. And so not too much play there at all, but that the body shell moves nice and freely on the posts there. So now with the axles lined up, now it's time to mark out the front wheel arches. So what I do with this here, and what you'll notice is that I haven't got the wheels on the car. The chassis is flat on the desk here. And at this point, many will measure the front edge, but I like to do it with the wheels on, just to make sure that body shell isn't too low. But I've got a couple of millimeters underneath there, 3 millimeters between the bottom edge of the body shell and the glass worktop here. So I'm now just going to mark where the axle is. On both sides, and then I'm going to use my compass cutter to cut out the front arch. For the next part, we need some front tires, some wheels, compass cutter, and the body shell. Now, what I do is personally, I don't really trust this gauge down the side of the compass cutter, so I line the spike up on the compass cutter in the center of the wheel arch, or in the center of the wheel, and I then measure out the width that I want to have between the blade and the tyre, and everyone's going to be different, but I like to have 2.5 mil between the tyre, the foam tyre, and the Lexan. So on this one it's saying 42 and a half on the compass cutter. So then I'll go to my spot that I marked with the axle. I lightly push it in, and then at this point here I'm scribing. And the thing with a compass cutter that I think most people make a mistake with is that they try to go too deep too soon. No pun intended. But if you take it easy, nice bit of foreplay, don't go in for the kill straight away, a few strokes, and then once you've done that, invariably you can ease it off. And if you get to a point at the end there, like I have, where I haven't quite gone deep enough, plenty of innuendo, you can then just pull it off like so. And if you get any rough edges, if you've got a Dremel and a Proline arch sander, you can just trim that up, but that's come out pretty good. So I'm going to do the same the other side. This compass cutter has definitely seen better days. And the blade is definitely on the way out, so making a bit of a hash of this. Again, if you've got a nice fresh compass cutter, it's definitely easier to do, but we're making it work. There we go. So she's come out fine there. So obviously the moment of truth is when we get the front wheels on, and we'll see if that's all lined up and I've talked a good game. I'll get the chassis. I'm going to put the wheels and tyres on now. So I've now put the wheels onto my car. Compass cutter again, Sharpie and the shell. Great news, sigh of relief every time I do it, but the wheels have lined up beautifully on the front here. So that's all come out nice for the camera, which is good news. Doesn't make me look so much of a tit. Now we've got to do the rear. Now on this Montec M20 shell that I'm fitting to my Eclipse chassis, you can see that there's actually, or you can't see, but there are actually arches that come pre-marked. I never get involved with the back wheel arch until the wheels are on. This chassis is now set at the correct ride height that I like to run, which is 3.4, 3.2. Once you've got the ride height correct, and that is important, you don't want to be doing this with the wrong ride height or the wrong tyre size. Just make sure that the car is race ready, if you like. Now what I do is I actually mark onto the outside of the shell. I actually mark the top of the tyre and the side of the tyre, and I do that on both sides, being sure to make this hand push the shell nicely onto the chassis. I just double check that I've got the right points. Excellent. Now I can take the shell off, get rid of the car. Now what I do I get my compass cutter again. I get the center of the wheel, and again these are cut to the size that I would start at. The rear tire, that is, it's cut to the size. Again, 2.5 mil outside of the wheel. Now when I'm cutting this out here, I make sure that I find a point that makes the wheel arch that 2.5 mil outside all of the marks that I've made on the shell here. And then go ahead and use the compass cutter to cut the arch out. Back is always easier, always a little bit thinner, but easier to potentially make a mistake as well and not get too eager. And so you can see there what I've done. I've just cut around, found the center, found 2.5 mil outside of all of those 3 points that I've made, and now I've cut the arch out. So I'm pretty guaranteed that I've got the arch in the right spot. All of that leaving the wheel off and trying to guess it and putting stuff on the axles, it never worked for me. Maybe it worked for you, but it never worked for me. Do the same here. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll put some cardboard underneath here just to stop it from having the opportunity to move. Again, just a bit. Definitely need a new compass cutter. Good. Now on the M20 shell, because we raised the rear up so high, this was new to me when I cut these shells out, so I cut it to the line. What you want to do with the M20 shell is not cut to the line, you want to cut a little bit lower. That's why it looks a bit strange with that small arch at the back there. But now you can see that the arch a bit low on that side, but I'll use my sander, which I'll show you in a minute. The arch there has come out pretty spot on, and that's the shell mounted. You can see it's a pretty easy process once you get yourself into a bit of a routine with it. But it's a great way of mounting the shell. I was never shown really how to get it on straight all of the time, every time, but hopefully that's given you some insight into how to do a 12 scale body shell. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and check you all again sometime soon.